Crystal.
What? No.
Not too late. Or the head
You need to get these fish in.
Yeah, I need to get the fish out too.
Hello, everyone. We'll wait just another minute to see if a few others show up, and then we'll go ahead and get started because we don't have a whole lot of time, probably about 35, 40 minutes, but we'll give them just another minute. If you want to go ahead and put in the chat what grade level you teach, and if you have any experience already with building thinking classrooms, that'll help us get to know each other a little bit. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Carrie, and I'm part of the Facebook group admin team. I am not an elementary teacher. This is the elementary session. Of course, anyone was welcome to join, but we want to try to focus on the elementary aspect. I am happy to talk about my experiences with my class and my 8th graders, but I really would like for those of you who teach elementary to feel free to jump right in and talk about your experiences, or maybe it's new to you and you have some concerns or some questions and your thoughts about the chapter. So we're looking at chapter 2, which is how we form collaborative groups in the thinking classroom. Is there anyone who'd like to start us out? Just jump in. We got a small enough group. Okay, well, I'll tell you what I did for 8th grade. So there are there are different ways you can make your groups. There's the Flippity app, and I tried that at the beginning, and I wasn't crazy about it. I know a lot of other people have used it and it worked for them. I'm not sure how that would apply to elementary. It's a spreadsheet type event if you haven't seen it, and you can put it on the overhead, and you can hit the button so many times and it'll keep regrouping the kids. What I did right before school started, I read some stuff on Pam Harris. I don't know if you've heard of her or not, but one of the things she said was to build relationships with kids, know their names before they come into your classroom. So I made little cards with my students' pictures and use those to try to learn names. And then when Flippity didn't work for me, I was like, hey, I've got all these cards. And so I used these to help me make my groups. And I think this would work with elementary, because Peter talks about in the book about having them sit with their random groups. And I didn't do that because I wanted the kids to have an assigned seat. With middle school, if you're going to be out, you have to have those assigned seats for the sub. And I needed that consistency. And so they would come in and get their seat. And I had groups of 6 for my seating chart, because my room isn't that big. And to be able to pull them away from my whiteboards, I had to have bigger groups at my desks instead of the groups of 3. And so they get in their seats and get whatever supplies they need, if they needed their folder or whatever. And I used my little cards to take attendance. I go, okay, who's here today? And if they weren't here, I'd set the card to the side, and then we'd talk about what we were going to do today. And I would stand there and shuffle the cards. And then I would pull 3 at a time and say, okay, Joe, Sue, and Alyssa, you're at board 1. And so I would call their names, and they'd go to the boards. I'd have the boards ready with whatever task, or maybe I'd have it on the overhead that day. And at the time we were still contact tracing. And so I would just shoot a picture real quick, clean it all up, put them all back together. And that's what worked for me. I feel like with elementary, I mean, Peter says in the book that you may have to do something where the kids put their supplies in an alternative place and not in their desk. I don't know how many of you have read the book, that section, but and I think that's a good idea, but I also know that space is an issue and storage is an issue, and you may not have space in your classroom for the kids to put all their supplies instead of in their desk. And so switching desks every day may not work. And for me, I didn't want to do that. And so that's where my cards came. I mean, you could even just have cards with names on them. Mine just happened to have the pictures because of the other thing I did. But it worked for me. Peter says it's a framework. Bring all your teacherly crafts into the framework. And so I just made it work for me. Anybody have any ideas? Want to help me out here?
I mean, I haven't, my name's Trey. Oh, go ahead. I haven't had a chance to implement it yet. I've been reading the book. I think I'm on chapter 8 now. But for my 5th grade class, and I rotate 2 different groups, I like you feel that I need to have the assigned seats. I need their stuff to go in there because I'm not sure where else I would do it for storage and still have board space around the room. So I plan on having them have their assigned seats, and I should have the space to do the groups of 3 at the seats. But just like last year, when we worked with our partners or our small groups, they knew that somebody else might be sitting in their chair or in their desk, and it wasn't just theirs because they already shared it with somebody in the other class, but they knew that, okay, somebody's allowed to sit there. And luckily we didn't have any problems with people touching inside the desk and all that kind of stuff that you sometimes do. So I think I'm just going to do that route so they can still go with their groups at any point in time, after we do that task, if I still have them working with them and I send them back for any reason, they could still stay with those groups just as long as they had their supplies. So that's what I'm thinking.
I worked with a teacher last year. I'm an instructional coach, so I support teachers, and they did all the students had assigned seats because we're in middle school and you need them when you're out and for other reasons. But on days where there'd be random grouping, she just had a deck of cards and you went and matched. If you had the 7 of clubs, you went with the 7 of clubs. And then that number was posted over the whiteboard, so you know which whiteboard you would use also. And it worked well and students got in the flow of it.
I've heard a lot of people talk about using the cards, and I had that thought process early on, and I don't know. I'm sure it works great for people. It just wasn't my thing, and that's okay. Everybody, everybody's process is different. So, Linda, did you have something?
Yeah, I did. So I have my kids also, I have taught 5th grade for a long time. I'm actually moving up to 6th grade this fall. But anyway, I had my kids sit at tables and they keep their stuff in bins, like those shoebox bins that they store and then they bring into class with them. And I would just have a coffee cup with different colored pieces of cardstock in it. And kids would stick their hand in the coffee cup, draw out a color, and then they would go to the table that had that same color on it. And then, so all of my kids had the same table and partners for 1 week. And then at the beginning of the next week, we'd mix it up and so every Monday morning, they'd stick their hand in the coffee cup, get a piece of paper, find that table, and that's who they worked with for the week. So, and that seemed to work. And there was quite a bit of movement with that.
I had a class that I would have them sometimes work with the same group more than one day. And there was some benefit to that. I think you just have to do what works for you. I like the idea of going a whole week with the same group. I did different groups every day and I like that too. So I think you just every class is different and you have to do what works with the dynamics of that class. Yeah, I like that. Yep, Ann.
I just wondered if anyone had any wisdom. I'm going to be starting at the virtual school in the fall. I've been brick and mortar for 22 years, and I'm teaching these math fundamentals classes that are going to be pretty small. They said maybe even just 4 to 6 students, but they're also in 4th and 6th grade level, but they're high school students. So I don't know if anyone has worked with really small classes. And also I'm thinking about the Flippity app or something like that, because I don't really have the physical space. So I have breakout rooms and I have, I was thinking about color coding my Jamboards and then assigning the Jamboards to the group. All my classes won't be that small, but I do have 2 classes that probably will be. So if anyone has any advice, I'd appreciate it.
And you said that that's going to be virtual?
Yeah, it's a virtual school. Yeah, the only things we get together maybe will be field trips and like some socializing events. Yeah, but they're all over the state of Kansas, my students.
So you may have to do breakout rooms or something like, right?
Yeah, definitely. I just was thinking about, making it visibly random. Like I haven't played around with the Flippity app or look for another tool, but like maybe making one of the students in charge of it so they can, really see that it really is random or something like that.
Yeah.
But also just that the whole class may just be 6 students. So, you're not going to be, you're going to be with the same person.
Right.
And I was thinking groups of 2, plus I'll have a special education co-teacher. So, which I haven't met her yet. So, or them yet. So.
Yeah.
I haven't looked, but there might be a digital deck of cards. Like there might be a way that you can do like the drawing a random deck of cards online. With all the interactive things they have right now, I'm sure there's something out there like that.
Right. Yeah, or I was thinking about just like making a permanent Jamboard with color coded backgrounds and then just using colors like,
Yeah.
you know, so that yellow group, red group, you know, I do have some elementary experience in my 22 years. It's a hodgepodge for sure. But this is brand new for me, and it's brand new reading the book this summer. So
Is there anyone who's implemented this virtually that's with us today that can talk about it a little bit?
well, I'll probably be back for the high school group. later.
Well, Peter does have a supplementary book. I don't have it
Mm,
today. It's
I saw that. Yeah.
and it's about maybe half the size of the first book. And
Mhm.
I haven't read it yet because we didn't really go virtual.
Mm.
We had a couple of weeks, but then we were in the classroom the whole time during COVID. But he addresses a lot of the different aspects of the virtual learning. And so there might be some pieces. And I think the book was like $12 or $15. It wasn't a lot.
Yeah. It's on my to get list, but I just wanted to absorb as much of this.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I've been stalking the Facebook group all school year, but I didn't really try to implement.
Yeah, and you might even at the top of the Facebook page, and there's the little search icon. You might even search virtual learning and see what posts come up and see what you might be able to find that way.
Yeah.
Because I know it's been discussed in
And I don't want to take up the oxygen. And I mean, I know everybody else has other,
Yeah.
those were the questions that were circling for me as far as visibly random groups and especially with smaller classes.
no,
If it
no,
wasn't
that's
virtual,
why
right?
we're here. That's why we're
Any
here. It's okay.
Good ideas for that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're familiar with Teresa Will's work, but she's been doing online math for a long, long time. And she has a website. She does a lot of different and interesting things with math, and that might have, I don't know if it has anything on there about random groupings, but you might check it out. She has a lot of templates and things that are very useful.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
All right, so unless someone has something they want to add, I was going to look at the questions to think about. The questions 3 and 4, it's on page 55 of the book. Can you think of some students who would benefit greatly from visibly random groups? And can you think of some students who will likely not enjoy the random groups? I kind of think those go together. And I think those are important things to consider because from my experience this last year with 8th graders, I know it's not elementary, but I think it applies. There's always that kid that's hard to group. I had one class in particular where I had a student who just couldn't make positive relationships with peers, and in fact did the exact opposite. And I could not group that kid with like 3 other kids in the group because of some things that had happened. And then I also had another class where I had a student who had tremendous anxiety issues and wouldn't go with the group unless her stepsister was in the group, and even then sometimes wouldn't go to the board. So that's one of the things I liked about having my little cards, because when I pulled the cards, when that particular student came up, if it was in a group they couldn't be in, then I would pull the card out and just pull until, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I can put up with that kid, with those 2 kids. Or sometimes I just lay them all out, because sometimes I couldn't even put the student next to other people's groups. And it was a challenge. So things like that happened for me. I don't know if anyone else had those kind of experiences. Maybe someone did, and they would like to share how they issues they might have had with groups.
So I think that was what I thought of first was the anxiety. So I typed in the chat, I actually teach college. Freshmen, I teach the pre-service K-8 math classes. So all my students, and majority is female, but they have, anxiety about college. They have anxiety about getting to know people, about coming to a math class in a math department when that's not necessarily, their comfort zone. A lot of them have math anxiety. And I just started reading the book. So before I did, then they got select their own groups. And then when we were virtual, which we've been for 2 years now, I put them into groups. I let them choose if they knew someone, if they were in the same dorm or something that gave them a little bit of comfort. And I ended up with some groups that worked so well, they would always share. And I ended up with groups that were awful. And I feel like if I'd done it more random, visibly every single class time, because you can do that easily in Zoom. You just put them in different breakout rooms, that maybe the people that ended up in groups, and I told them, if your group's not working, you want a different group, let me know. And I moved some people around that reached out, but then I know there's first-gen students that would never reach out to me for something like that. They would think that that's a failure to reach out to your professor and say, hey, I don't like my group. But I think just that high level of anxiety, that once they would know their group, that would ease their anxiety a little bit. So that was my first thing why it would not work maybe for students. So any suggestions or help with that?
I sometimes not, I mean, every once in a while, I might have let algebra kids pick their partner or partners, but I found it was just easier to let the random groups fall, because you get kids with their friends and then they're busy chatting. And then if they, and I'm always that person where, they pick their groups and there's always that kid who doesn't get picked. And then I feel so bad for that kid because that kid didn't get picked. And when you pull the random groups yourselves, you don't have that issue. And so I tried really hard to stick with that. I did, like I said, with that one class, I had issues sometimes with doing the random groups. And there were times where, because I had prep right before that class, and I would pull the cards ahead of time. And so that, I mean, even though it was still pretty random, I could move kids so they weren't next to each other. And then I just wrote the names on the whiteboard. And so when they came in, they knew already where they were going to go. Now, this was a few months already in, and they never questioned me if it was random or not. They just went with it. But they do want to see that it's random. And I'd have kids who their desk would be right up to mine, and they'd be looking over to see when their picture was going to come up so they could see which group they were in. And so I've learned I had to move some kids away from my desk because they would go, oh, I'm with that person. And it's tough, too bad. But I found that for me anyway, it was just better just to make it as random as possible, as often as possible. And they reacted better to that. Their behavior was better. Not that it was fantastic. I had 8th graders, but it just seemed to work better for me. Anyone else have an experience they want to share?
Can you hear me?
I mean, I know, sorry.
Go ahead.
I mean, I know for me, whenever, because I would occasionally, I use Class Dojo not to communicate to parents, but I have before, and again, I teach 5th grade with Dojo points, but even when I didn't use the Dojo points last year, I would use the randomizer in that at times to form groups. And then, I mean, I know it's different for her at the college level, but that whole classroom culture thing, my homeroom group had a wonderful classroom culture where they were much better about taking care of each other. And even though there was occasional whines with the students who really never liked to do any work, for the most part, they were really receptive to that whole random grouping because they had that good connection and that family bond, versus my second class where some of them were occasionally flat out rude when they saw the names grow up, and I had to make adjustments and have those conversations. But the reason why I like Class Dojo is because for those few people that, you know, I can't put somebody with somebody else because they will only play the entire time, or because they've had an issue and they like got in trouble and I'm not allowed to put them together. There was a way in there where, even though it appears random, you could select that this person cannot be in the same group with this person. So then that alleviated, they still assumed it was random because they saw it on Dojo and they didn't know that was an option. Whereas I made it where it would never group them together no matter what, by just the settings. So that was a good thing that worked well for me at the elementary level.
Tracy, I think there's another program. I don't remember if it was the flip, but I think there was another program that grouped kids that you could mark that these kids shouldn't be together. And I can't remember what the name of that was, because, you know, that's been a year ago. But I know there was another one that did that. And that's a nice feature. Cindy, did you have?
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to add that in my class, going back to, I guess, the original question, I joined it a little late. The students had like a home group. So as soon as they would come into the classroom, they were in groups of 3. So they stayed in that group for like 3 weeks, like a home group. Like as soon as they come into the classroom, they get the supplies, that's their group. And then as soon as we started the lesson, then they would all line up and I would issue out the cards, and then they would be in those groups for the math instruction. So they always had a home group that they felt comfortable with to kind of like ease their anxiety. They knew they were going to come into the classroom, be able to communicate and chat for a little bit with someone that they felt comfortable with. And then it's okay, guys, let's go ahead and get in line. And they thought it was almost like a game. Okay, now we're going to, start our lesson. We're going to do our different groups. And I would change their groups in a 90-minute math lesson, like between 5 to 10 times. So if there was someone that they didn't get along with, it wasn't going to be that long that they would be with them anyways. And so they learned to kind of cope with that and be like, okay, I can work through this because I'm only going to be with this group for a very short time. And then, okay, go back to your home group, discuss what you guys talked about with your random group. And then, okay, let's get back in line. And that's how I would go throughout my lesson. So that kind of helped with those students that didn't really get along with others.
Cindy, what grade level do you teach?
3rd grade. I teach 3rd graders.
Anyone else have something to add?
Can I just ask a question about building the culture for group work? I mean, what is the work that people do at the start of the year that normalizes that we work with everybody and everybody is an expert?
I mean, I know for me, and for our district, we use what's called harmony cards or a harmony. There's different things that you can also find online for it. And it's a program where it has a series of different types of questions. For the lower grades, there's like a book that you can read with them. For the older grades like mine, and there's different tasks based on grades. Some of them are like tasks that they do together that are fun things. They take anywhere from 2 minutes to 10 minutes, whether it's holding your hands in like a big giant knot and getting untied basically. A lot of time, because of time spaces, like not having enough time, we would have to do it at the end of the day, and I would just go with the harmony cards, and then they would partner up with somebody and they would have to partner with somebody else that they haven't partnered before, and I would do that for the week, and then I would change it to something else. We also did activities like look around the room, use your whiteboard, go find a new partner, come up with a story. Okay, so this person on the right is taking the story, go find a new partner and add something to that story. And so then it got them moving around the room and just more comfortable working together and being nice to each other. So I think that's what helped my last year students.
What we did last year was the week of inspirational math. That's basically through Joe Bowler on YouTube. We're looking at doing that again this year, but we're tweaking it to do, I guess you would call them like little icebreaker things to help build that culture, to help not only us learn, the teachers learn names, but the students learn each other's names. And so, you know, put them to the boards and then just do something where they go around the room and say their name and I don't know, their favorite food, you know, just something about themselves, or maybe, you know, tell how you're feeling today based on the weather. Well, I'm a little foggy today, you know, or something like that. We haven't quite pieced it all together, but that is a part that we want to do that first week with our non-curricular tasks, just to help the kids get to know each other a little bit better. So anybody have any other things that they do or thought about doing to help build culture?
With my kids, I had something called like STEM bins. So I would give them like 3 to 5 minutes of like free play, and they could work with whomever they wanted to build different objects. So sometimes I would give them like a deck of cards and that's to build a tower. I'm sorry, my son's talking. Sometimes I would give them like connecting cubes and they had to build something. So, or they played Mancala or chess. So they just built that culture of helping each other and like, oh, there's the next move or whatever. And they would go around and playing different activities. So they got to meet different students.
Yeah, I teach 4th grade and we use responsive classroom a lot in our school. And I only started with the school last year or so and learning about it, but it's a lot of modeling. And so that's one of the things I want to really focus on at the beginning of the year is just modeling and talking a lot about like when, you know, when groups are called, you know, what's an appropriate rate of response, and like talk about it ahead of time, but also talking about and modeling how to communicate within the group also is one of my goals, and just teaching them language around that. Because I had some great, really enthusiastic discussions last year in certain groups, but then sometimes they would get pretty crazy with each other. So.
Sorry, I'm making notes of things when I hear something I want to remember. So,
Does anyone have experience doing group work with students who are on the autistic spectrum? We have an average of 2 or 3 students per year that are on the autistic spectrum. And in this year, we actually have a student who will have a communication device. So I'm trying to figure out, how do you bring this in and accommodate their needs?
So I taught this last year at a school within a school that has kids with a wide range of learning disabilities. And we had a few kids on the spectrum, but of course the spectrum is such a wide spectrum. Ours were pretty, I hate the term, but higher functioning, more verbal, but had definite, one of them in particular, well, 2 were really able, they were able to tell me when it was too much and when they needed to step out and take a break. And we had certain cues for that, or, you know, and we had to communicate about this a lot, because one would say, you know, I'm going outside, you know, and all the other kids are like, well, we want to go outside, you know, it's, so it was like this, we had to figure out kind of more subtle ways to do that. But there were times they were great in group work. So it was just really, you know, it was just sort of figuring out how they were that day and sort of what preceded class and how long class was that day and what they needed. I don't know if that helps, but.
Yeah, I would say I had classes last year that were, you know, 60 to 70% identified students. And, you know, it definitely is a spectrum. And that's what she just said. I wanted to pile on that from day to day, the way that they can interact is different, right? It's going to be different. So really creating that comfort zone with them and with you to be able to communicate, hey, I'm having a, you know, I'm not feeling it today, or, you know, a kind of signal, you know, and then, yeah, I really struggled with that, how to get the whole group, because they all had their own needs, right, to understand that what some person needs to learn is not what you need to learn, even though you think it is, right? Yeah, it's a puzzle. I really was leaning on my special education team, but that was like, I had maybe 7 or 8 different special education teachers in, one class. And they weren't in the class, so it was a lot of communicating with a lot of teachers. So I'm looking forward to just having one co-teacher in the virtual school.
I've been watching my time. I think we're down to just a few minutes left. Does anyone have any last thoughts or questions? That's my timer. I didn't want to lose track. See, I have the free version of Zoom, so we only get like 40 minutes. I just didn't want it to cut us off in the middle of something good. If anybody has anything they want to share real quick.
If the Facebook group wants to, start a Venmo or something, we could buy a subscription. I chip in.
Right. Yep. Maybe throw that out on TikTok and see who responds.
Mm. I mean, we have enough people. It wouldn't be that much per person.
Seriously.
Right?
Yeah. I think we've
To get a
20-some
group.
thousand. 20-some
Yeah.
thousand. It's crazy.
I have some other groups, other fellowships that, we just all chipped in and bought a subscription, and
I'll
any of us
that
can
out to
host,
admin.
at that point, we just
Yeah.
have to know the host code.
Yep.
But it's also nice to keep it short and sweet, especially during summer.
Well, and I think it's enough time for this chapter too. So,
Right. Yeah.
so unless someone else has something they want to add real quick, we'll go ahead and close up the meeting. I'll be back in about 20 minutes for the next session, if anybody wants to come back. And then there's the session at 2 o'clock for high school.
Yes, thank you so
Not an
much.
expert, but I'm just willing to talk about it. So, thank you all for coming. I hope you got at least something, little tidbit of something out of the session. So have a great day.